Good evening, and thank you so much for inviting me to speak here today. It's an absolute honour to be here after hearing such an inspiring story from Lord Noon. I'll tell you my story. I'm afraid I really didn't make chicken tikka masala the national dish, so I can't claim to do that. But what I will say is that I was born in London, and I live in West Hampstead with my husband. But I spent my early childhood growing up in the poorest parts of Asia, where I saw firsthand the staggering difference between the rich and the poor. And I saw the impact that wealth can have on the life chances of people. I also realized that empowering communities lay at the heart of any movement for social justice. So when I was 16, I decided I had to make a difference. And I thought maybe politics was the right way of doing that. What I would say right from the start is that no political party probably aligns to every single one of your values and ideas. But I looked at the political parties and decided that the Labour Party, for me, was most closely aligned with my values. And I thought if I wanted to make a difference, you can't really do it from the sidelines. What you need to do is try and join the party and make a difference from the inside. So I joined the Labour Party. And Lord Noon talked a lot about seizing the opportunity when you get it. I was at a fundraising event for the flood in Bangladesh, and I decided that I would march up to the MP who represented East London and ask her if she would give me some work experience. What I would say to you, and I'm not trying to sound patronising, but if you speak a second language, it really makes a big difference when you start working. So the fact that I speak Bengali made a big difference, because I went up to the MP and I said, could I do some translation work for you? And she said, yes, come to Parliament. You have to remember that I'm older than I look, so this was about 12 years ago. So I turned up to Parliament, and Parliament looks very different now, but 12 years ago, the security guards kept stopping me and asking me if I was there on a school trip, or whether I was actually working, because there weren't that many people who looked like me. So then I started working and interning. I finished university, and then I worked my way up to work for an MP and do casework. Managed to work my way up, become a policy advisor for one of our shadow ministers, and also as a press officer during the time when Gordon Brown was Prime Minister. Then I decided, well, I've been working for other people, representing other people. Do I want to try and do this myself? I was already a school governor. I was the governor on the Camden and Islington Mental Health Board. I was a governor on the Adult Education College, and I thought, okay, let me stand for council. So I put myself forward, and I stood to be a councillor. For an equal number of people who said to me, don't stand, there was a lot of people who said to me, no, you should stand. And what I would say for politics is that you have to have incredibly thick skin. You can't be turned off when people say, you, a councillor, you're barely 5 foot. Like it had anything to do with it. But I had to point out, we had MPs who were tiny, and, why couldn't we have councillors as well? So I stood for council, and I got elected on the 10th of May, and I was put in the cabinet in council on the 11th of May, so it was quite a steep learning curve. I was also, and I don't know whether to be proud of this statistic or not, we have a huge Bengali community in Camden, and I was the first councillor of Bangladeshi origin who was a woman to be on the council. And you can imagine how the local papers, were all over this. First Bengali woman, first woman of Muslim origin, in Camden, in cabinet. And I had to be very careful about striking a balance. Did I want to become the councillor who was known for her ethnicity, or did I want to become the councillor who was trying to save homes, trying to get education places? And you have to remember that you have to be proud of your roots, proud of where you're from, also remember why you were elected. So the first day in council, I went to the town hall. I think the officers were quite surprised to see me, and they said to me, well, Councillor Siddiq, you're aware of the austerity measures. You're aware that you're in charge of a £22 million budget. Most of the services there are discretionary. Services like libraries, theatres, parks and open spaces, voluntary sector and community sectors. So they said to me, you have to have a 25% cut to your budget, and we recommend that you sell off half the library buildings in Camden. So I looked at the proposal, and I was thinking, these people might have been around for a long time, but there is no way I'm selling off the library buildings in which I studied for my A-levels and which got me to university. So I did the thing that you're not meant to do. I rejected the officer recommendation. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do this. And they were shocked, to say the least. Who was this young girl coming in, walking in, telling them that there was no way she was going to accept their recommendations? So they said to me, well, okay, fine. They weren't very happy, I can tell you that. And they said to me, what alternative solution do you have? You've still got to save money, a 25% cut to your budget. So that's when I thought, okay, I've got to come up with something. And I have to say, you were talking about business a lot and enterprise and social enterprises. I had absolutely no idea. I had worked in politics for a long time and we weren't really taught about business models. So I started reading the KPMG report on a mixed economy model of retaining assets, but also trying to run public services. So the first thing I did was I undertook a huge consultation. And if people tell you that residents are apathetic about politics, the one thing they're not apathetic are about the libraries. 6,000 people responded to my consultation, and 1,000 children responded to the children's consultation. And I had huge meetings, very cold kind of churches where 200 people would turn up. What became apparent from the consultation was that there was a real desire to run the libraries from community groups, but they made it clear that this wasn't the big society idea. You weren't going to crush the roots of local government and just put the onus on small organisations. They wanted to have a mixed economy model. So I looked into the principles of a cooperative party, I looked into the principles of a mutual, and I thought, if I retain the buildings, the asset from the council, and I ask the communities if they can take over the running, so I would be in charge of heating, lighting, rent relief, IT, but the actual running would be done by a community organisation. Would that work? So I went through a procurement process. I was determined to be very thorough about this, and I also didn't really have the support of the officers even at that stage. So I went through a procurement process, financial bids were put forward, I looked at them very carefully, and I realised that the social capital in that area would allow community libraries to exist. But to do this, I had to do a big equality impact assessment because not every area in the country would allow this. But in Hampstead, Belsize Park and Chalk Farm, you can have a model like this. So we started doing the whole process. There were lots of problems with covenants on public buildings, which don't allow them to be run by the community, a lot of financial problems to work through. And I went to lots of meetings where I got blamed for trying to close the libraries by people like Jamie Oliver and Alan Bennett. And then what happened in the end is that they did take over the running of the libraries. They've been going on for a year now. Arts Council England has used them as a case model in the report they've published recently. And now, obviously, the officers say it was their idea right from the beginning. But it's all started now. But the point I wanted to make is, during the time this process was going on, what I noticed was that a lot of women from hard-to-reach communities, people who had never engaged with politics before, were coming forward, maybe because I was leading it, I don't know, but they were coming forward and giving their views and their ideas. And what they're doing is that they really know how to respond to this changing landscape. I think there's a blurring of the private sector, the public sector, the voluntary sector, and perhaps the partnership working is the only way that we'll be able to still provide services that we're used to. But it's these women who really have had the ability and the skills and the confidence to make me run this mixed economy model. So I would say to all those women, and if you're in touch with the hard-to-reach communities, this is when we need them to move away from the sideline, come and join us, and be a part of this, because I think this is the time where they're really going to shine.